The entire full chapter, Winnipeg chapter of the Rock Machine.
Local police say they've crushed the outlaw biker group Rock Machine after a series of arrests in Winnipeg.
The Rebels boss was in his usual spot on the terraces of the Kwinana Motorplex, watching the races with his family.
In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, the arrival of the Canadian Rock Machine in Australia kicked off a brutal rivalry with the local Rebels MC. The Rock Machine, already infamous for its violent past in Canada, decided to spread its influence down under in 2008 by setting up a chapter in Perth. But this bold move didn't sit well with the rebels, and what started as a turf war quickly spiraled into full-scale chaos, with fire bombings, assassination attempts, and bloody clashes. This is the story of the deadly conflict between the Rock Machine and the rebels in Australia. To understand how the Rock Machine ended up in Australia, we need to rewind a bit to Canada. The club was founded in late 1986 by Salvatore Cazzetta and his brother Giovanni. At the time, Cazzetta had just split from the Hells Angels after a shocking event known as the Lennoxville Massacre. In this gruesome incident, the Hells Angels turned on some of their own members, executing several of them and dumping their bodies in the St. Lawrence River. Cazzetta saw this as an unforgivable betrayal of their code, so he broke away and started the Rock Machine MC. The Rock Machine grew strong in Montreal, and for a while, it looked like they were heading in the right direction. Tensions with the Hells Angels were low, thanks to Cazzetta's friendship with Maurice "Mom" Boucher, the president of the Hells Angels Quebec chapter. But that peace didn't last long. In 1994, Cazzetta was jailed on drug trafficking charges, leaving the Rock Machine without strong leadership. That's when Boucher seized the opportunity, pushing his own Hells Angels-linked clubs into the Rock Machine's drug markets. This set off the bloody Quebec biker war, which raged from 1994 to 2002 and claimed over 150 lives, including innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. It's said that Boucher even offered up to $100,000 for the murder of a Rock Machine member. By the end of the war, the Rock Machine was decimated, and in a desperate move to survive, they disbanded and patched over with the Bandidos MC. But the Bandidos soon faced their own internal issues, leaving many former Rock Machine members clubless. In 2008, a group of these ex-Bandidos, along with former Mongols members, decided to relaunch the Rock Machine. They set up a new chapter in Winnipeg, reviving the club's original black and platinum colors. Despite starting off as a smaller club, the Rock Machine quickly made a name for itself internationally. If you're in Australia, chances are you've heard of Brent Recker, also known as The Rock. This guy didn't waste any time making waves in the Aussie motorcycle scene. He set his sights high, claiming he was going to be the biggest, baddest biker in Australia, and he certainly wanted to look the part too. Covered in tattoos from head to toe, he joked that while others hung art on walls, he wore his on his skin. According to his mom, Brent was a pretty regular kid growing up, but by the time he was 17, he had made up his mind. He told her he was going to start his own motorcycle club. And while Brent was a man with big ambitions, he wasn't flying solo in this mission. It wasn't just him pushing for the Rock Machine to expand into Australia. Several other key figures from the Aussie motorcycle community got involved. They reached out to the Rock Machine in Canada and asked if they could set up shop in Australia. The Canadians agreed, and in 2008, the first chapter was officially formed in Perth, with Brent stepping up as Sergeant-at-Arms. The Rock Machine quickly started making serious moves in Australia. It wasn't long before another chapter opened in Sydney in early 2009. By then, the Perth chapter alone had over 20 members, and the club had expanded into Eastern Australia, bringing their numbers up to around 60 members, including those in Sydney. On December 4th, 2009, the Rock Machine held its first national run in Australia, with over 80 members gathering in Perth for the event. In the world of bikie clubs, clashes are pretty much inevitable, and the established clubs quickly took notice of these fresh faces. At first, the trouble was mostly confined to pub brawls and street fights, but things took a nasty turn when Critical J set up a Rock Machine chapter in the suburbs of Perth. This move was seen as a direct challenge by rival clubs, especially the Rebels, who were none too happy about sharing their turf. The Rebels are a huge force in the Australian bikie world. At their peak, they had around 70 chapters spread across the country and over 1,000 members, making them by far the biggest club in Australia. But it wasn't just their size that gave them power. They were also linked to a range of illegal activities, from drug trafficking to extortion and even tax evasion. On the flip side, the Rock Machine were the new kids on the block, eager to take their place in the game. Even though they were smaller, the Rock Machine didn't shy away from taking on a giant like the Rebels. At first, the rivalry was pretty minor. Australian authorities say it all began with some trash talk and online threats between members. But things quickly escalated when a few young rebels jumped ship and joined the Rock Machine, eager to earn their full patch. By July 10th, 2010, tensions boiled over in a violent brawl at a nightclub, leaving several people injured, including some police officers. A few months later, in October 2010, the Rock Machine decided to step things up with a firebombing of a car owned by a Rebels member. But the real explosion happened on the November 5th, 2010, at a mixed martial arts event, where around 20 members from both clubs got into an all-out brawl. Witnesses said several rebels were injured in the fight. Just a week later, on November 12th, a group of 15 rebels decided to ride through the Fremantle Entertainment District, looking for any Rock Machine members bold enough to show their colors. But when they searched the area, they found nothing. 4 days later, the Rock Machine retaliated by setting fire to the Inca Salt Tattoo Shop, a business linked to the rebels. The fire started early in the morning, and when firefighters arrived, it was clear that it was no accident. Police later confirmed that the arson was connected to the Rock Machine. As the violence continued to escalate, things got even more destructive. A Rebels member's car was hit by a firebomb, and another member's home was broken into, trashed, and ransacked. Then, on November 29, 2010, police pulled over a Rock Machine member during a traffic stop and found an arsenal of high-powered weapons, including rifles, a shotgun, and loads of ammunition. With both sides ramping up the violence, it was clear that the war between the Rock Machine and the Rebels was far from over. As 2011 kicked off, the violence between the Rock Machine and the Rebels flared up again. In January, members of both clubs clashed at the Click nightclub in Fremantle, leaving several people injured. The very next day, a Rock Machine member found his tattoo parlor in Spearwood trashed, with the manager beaten by a group of rebels. Then, on January 24, 2011, the police decided to make a move. They rammed an armored vehicle through the front gates of the Rebels' Osborne chapter clubhouse, followed by tactical response officers who used an angle grinder to cut through the security gate and tossed in stun grenades. After all that effort, the police reported finding absolutely nothing of value. This sparked a public outcry, with the Rebels' Western Australia president, Nick Martin, demanding that the government pay for the damage to their clubhouse. Things didn't calm down. On February 25, 2011, the police raided the Rock Machine's Perth clubhouse and uncovered a huge stash of high-grade explosives. And we're not talking about a small quantity. Police seized enough detonators and industrial-strength explosives to blow up a large building. Despite the massive raid and explosives bust, tensions kept rising. On March 18, 2011, Nick Martin became the target of an assassination attempt right outside his home in Perth. He was hit by a bullet that pierced his elbow, but luckily Martin survived with only minor surgery. In typical biker style, he later got a tattoo around the bullet scar, joking with the phrase, "better luck next time." Just days later, on March 24, 2011, the police stepped up their efforts, raiding 9 different properties linked to both clubs in a massive crackdown. Across Australia, the police raids uncovered a massive stash of weapons, including over a dozen rifles, a military practice mortar, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. But despite the scale of the operation, only 2 people were actually charged. However, they did manage to charge a Rock Machine member for the earlier attempt on Nick Martin's life. In early 2012, the Rock Machine strengthened their hold in Perth by setting up a second chapter called the Southside or City Crew Perth chapter. This expansion was fueled by a wave of defections from the Finks Motorcycle Club, with several of their members making the switch to the Rock Machine. The Finks, like the Rock Machine, had long been at odds with the Rebels, and even more Finks members from Eastern Australia began flocking to the Rock Machine as authorities in Queensland started cracking down on them, slapping them with a criminal organization label, and tightening the noose around their operations. Meanwhile, Brent Recker, aka The Rock, was arrested, along with another member, in 2011 for extortion and making threats. The trouble began when a group of young men falsely claimed to be connected to the Rock Machine. In response, Recker and a few others confronted them at a tattoo shop in Spearwood. The young men were given an ultimatum: either attack their friend who had started the rumors or pay $22,000. Instead of caving in, they reported the incident to the police, which led to Recker receiving a 3-year prison sentence. He was granted parole in 2013, with the condition that he stay away from any members or associates of outlaw motorcycle clubs. Years later, Recker reappeared in the East as the new national president of the Finks. Amidst all the chaos between the two clubs, it seemed like the Rock Machine was starting to get the upper hand. Many experts on motorcycle clubs pointed out that their unpredictable, bold tactics made it hard for the rebels, and even the authorities, to keep up. The Rock Machine followed a low-profile strategy for growth, expanding quietly and staying under the radar. It's even been openly mentioned how the Rock Machine doesn't usually wear club memorabilia when entering new territories. As one member put it, your next-door neighbor could be a member of the Rock Machine, and you wouldn't even know it. While they rode Harley-Davidsons like everyone else, they didn't follow the traditional biker look with leather jackets and patches. Instead, they often wore rings featuring the club's iconic eagle emblem. This stealthy approach made it tough for their rivals and the authorities to track them down. The Rock Machine's ability to stay off the radar made it tough for both rivals and law enforcement to track their movements, and this wasn't the first time they played the long game. Back in 2007, after the bloody Quebec biker war, many Rock Machine members and supporters in Canada were facing charges. The club went underground for a while, but came back stronger, growing quietly as they waited for their numbers to rise. At one point, Australian authorities even noticed a spike in online searches asking how to join the Rock Machine. But there was a catch. While their numbers were increasing, the quality of recruits wasn't the best. Most of the new members were young and undisciplined, which made it harder for the club to maintain control. This led to internal conflicts within the group, with many of the new bikies doing whatever they wanted. This created an opening for law enforcement to infiltrate the club and start breaking it down from the inside. In November 2012, Western Australia passed one of the toughest laws aimed at cracking down on organized crime, especially targeting outlaw motorcycle clubs. The law allowed police to ask a judge to label certain groups as criminal organizations if they were involved in illegal activity or posed a public threat. Although it took about a year for the law to be fully enforced, it made some of the younger members think twice about sticking around. On top of that, frequent police raids only added more pressure on the Rock Machine. By 2013, the club found itself in a difficult spot. One of their Perth chapters switched allegiance to the Bandidos, and though the Rock Machine seemed to be on the ropes, they weren't done yet. For the next couple of years, the club kept a low profile. While authorities couldn't pinpoint exactly what the Rock Machine was up to, it was clear they weren't gone for good. By 2015, rumors of a comeback started to spread, and reports from local outlets mentioned the club was active again in areas like Christie's Beach and Seaford. In 2018, sightings of the Rock Machine were confirmed, with members wearing their emblem and the words, "Rock Machine Nomads." Not long after that, authorities confirmed the Rock Machine had resumed operations by reopening their Perth clubhouse. This move reignited tensions with the rebels, and once again, the streets were buzzing with reports of arson and drive-by shootings. Then, on December 12, 2020, the Rock Machine's return made a dramatic turn. On a sunny afternoon at Perth Motorplex, families were enjoying a drag racing event, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Among the crowd was none other than Nick Martin, the former president of the Rebels. As the event unfolded, a bullet suddenly cut through the air, striking Nick Martin in the chest. Chaos erupted as people scrambled for safety, unsure if more shots were coming. Martin passed away on the spot. Authorities quickly launched an investigation, with over 100 officers assigned to find the shooter. Task Force REL stormed properties, raided homes, and arrested suspects in the hunt for those responsible. Though no one was officially named at the time, suspicion naturally fell on the Rock Machine. 3 months later, an ex-Army sharpshooter was arrested and sentenced to 20 years. The shooter had made one crucial mistake. He had taken his rifle to a licensed gunsmith for a barrel replacement just a month after the hit. This slip-up allowed investigators to trace the modified weapon back to the bullet found at the scene. Police also discovered a shoe print at the crime scene, which was identified as a specific model of Fila running shoe. CCTV footage later confirmed that the shooter had been spotted at the Perth Motorplex multiple times wearing those exact shoes. Mobile phone towers also placed the suspect at the sniper's position right before the shot was fired, and shortly after, the phone was turned off to evade tracking. By then, the investigation had started piecing things together. Police began surveilling the suspect and followed him to a bushland in Warborough, where they found nearly $250,000 buried in PVC pipes. During sentencing, the shooter cooperated with authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence. He revealed that David Pye, a former Rebels member, had hired him for the job. The shooter also explained how he had been watching Martin's movements, conducted drone flybys around his house, and even practiced his shot before taking the fatal shot from 300 meters away at the Motorplex. He was promised $150,000 for the hit, and claimed Pye had also offered to pay him to kill a woman living in Thailand, a senior commander in the Rebels. David Pye pleaded not guilty when he appeared in court. On December 25, 2020, 200 Rebels members escorted Nick Martin's coffin, which was adorned with $100 bills. A convoy of police cars trailed behind, with a police sniper watching from a helicopter overhead. However, tensions within the Rebels were simmering. Rumors had surfaced that Martin had mismanaged club funds and was blamed for losing members to the Mongols earlier in the year. The situation grew even murkier when it was revealed that Martin's home was robbed during his funeral, with over $20,000 stolen from his widow. Now, in 2024, both the Rock Machine and Rebels are still active in Australia. The Rock Machine has grown to 11 chapters across the country, while the Rebels remain Australia's largest outlaw motorcycle club. Tensions are still high, and it remains uncertain what the future holds for both clubs. Only time will tell what happens next.